Have you ever just looked up at the night sky, at the moon, and thought to yourself, who actually owns that? It sounds like a pretty simple question, right? But the answer, well, it's getting more complicated by the day. We are right on the edge of a new space race. But this time, the prize isn't just planting a flag. Nope. It's about the resources buried under the surface. And believe me, the fight for those resources is already kicking off.
And the stakes here? They could not be higher. Back in 2009, NASA found something incredible: significant amounts of water on the moon. Now, this wasn't just some cool science fact. No, this was an absolute game changer. Why? Because water can be split into hydrogen and oxygen. That gives you breathable air and, maybe even more importantly, rocket fuel. For anyone dreaming of a permanent human presence in space, this was like striking oil in the middle of a desert.
And just like that, the race was on. But hold on, this isn't your grandfather's space race, not some Cold War showdown between superpowers. Today, it's private companies that are really leading the charge, and they're driven by the massive potential for profit. They see a future where the moon isn't just a place to visit, it's a gas station, a factory, and a launch pad to the rest of the solar system.
And the potential here is just staggering. We're talking about more than just water. The moon has something called helium-3, a super rare isotope that could be the key to clean nuclear fusion, potentially solving our energy problems right here on Earth. And that's just the moon. The asteroids nearby are basically flying treasure chests, packed with trillions of dollars worth of minerals like iron, nickel, and platinum. This isn't science fiction anymore, folks. This is the next great economic frontier.
Which, of course, brings us right back to that big question. If a private company pours billions into setting up a mine on the moon, do they own what they dig up? Can they sell it? I mean, who gets to write the rulebook for the final frontier? This is where our story takes a hard turn into the weeds of international law and into the mystery of a treaty that tried and totally failed to answer these exact questions.
All right, so the main clue in this whole mystery is a document called the 1979 Moon Agreement. It was designed to be the ultimate guide for using lunar resources, but instead it turned into one of the biggest flops in the history of space law. And to really get why, we need to take a quick look at what came before it.
You see, back in 1967, the world actually got its act together and signed the Outer Space Treaty, and it was a huge success. It basically said no country can claim the moon or any other planet as its own. Space was for everyone, the province of all mankind. But then came the Moon Agreement, just 12 years later, which was supposed to build on that idea, and it just went spectacularly wrong.
So just how wrong did it go? Get this, to this day, only 13 nations have actually ratified the treaty. 13! And here's the kicker. Not a single one of them is a major spacefaring power. The US, Russia, China, none of them are on board. So what on earth was in this treaty that scared everybody away?
Well, the whole problem really boiled down to three little words that carried a ton of baggage. At the very heart of the Moon Agreement was this one legal concept, and when you applied it to the moon, it turned out to be, well, explosive. Okay, so Article 11 of the treaty declared the moon and all its resources the common heritage of mankind. On the surface, that sounds pretty good, right? Noble, even. A nice follow-up to the 1967 treaty. But here's the thing about vague legal phrases. They become a battleground, and this one was quickly filled with two totally opposite meanings.
The fight was all about two completely different ways of seeing common heritage. For developing nations, it meant common property. Their argument was that lunar resources belong to everyone, period. So they should be managed by some international body that would share the wealth and the technology. But for the United States and other free market countries, it meant something totally different. A domain for common use, where private companies absolutely had the right to explore, to extract, and to profit from what they invested.
And all of a sudden, this wasn't just some dusty debate about space law, it was a full-blown ideological war. Critics in the West started seeing the treaty as this backdoor attempt to create a socialist paradise on the moon, one that would kill private enterprise before it ever got off the ground. And they had a very recent and very scary example of what that could look like.
As it turns out, the exact same common heritage debate was going on at the exact same time, but in a totally different place, the deep sea. The UN was working on its Convention on the Law of the Sea to manage mining on the international seabed, and the system they came up with absolutely terrified potential investors.
The proposed plan for seabed mining looked like this. First, private companies would have to pay fees and royalties to a new international authority. Second, they'd have to compete head-to-head with a publicly funded mining operation called the Enterprise.
And third, and this is the part that horrified corporations, they'd be forced into mandatory technology transfer. They'd have to give away their trade secrets and innovations.
So when lawmakers like Congressman John Breaux looked at the fuzzy language in the Moon Agreement, they saw the shadow of that seabed plan looming large. They were afraid of creating a similar international body for the Moon that would tax, compete with, and steal technology from private companies.
So this brings us to the final verdict, the real reason the Moon Agreement failed so completely. It wasn't just the ideological fight or the scary precedent, it was something way more fundamental to business, something that kills deals faster than anything else: crippling uncertainty. In the end, what killed the treaty was a pretty simple formula. You take a bunch of vague rules, you add a terrifying real-world example of how it could go wrong, and what do you get? You get a de facto moratorium, a complete and total standstill on private development.
Let me break it down. Just put yourself in an investor's shoes. The treaty literally said that the rules for this new international system would only be decided after lunar mining became possible. Just think about that. A company would have to spend billions of dollars to develop the tech and prove they could get the resources, only to have a brand new set of rules slapped on them after they'd done all the work. It's what lawyers call a risk of ex post facto appropriation, basically having your investment snatched away by some future committee. It was a deal no rational person would ever take.
So the treaty is dead in the water, and we're stuck in this legal gray zone. Does that mean we should just let a finders keepers free-for-all happen on the Moon? Well, that idea comes with its own massive set of dangers. As one critic warned, a total lack of rules is not the answer. An unregulated Moon could quickly turn into a Wild West scenario, pushing countries to militarize space to protect their assets, and maybe even sparking conflicts over the most valuable spots. The problem with the Moon Agreement wasn't that it tried to regulate, it was that it proposed the wrong kind of regulation. The good news is, we actually have successful models to learn from. That scary seabed regime, it was eventually renegotiated in 1994 into a much more market-friendly system, which proves that compromise is possible. We also have the International Telecommunications Union, or ITU. For decades, it's successfully managed who gets which orbital slot for satellites. It's a technical, non-political framework that just focuses on preventing signal interference, and by doing that, it allows a massive commercial industry to thrive.
Now this really leaves us with the ultimate question for our time. As we're standing right on the brink of becoming a multiplanetary species, this is the challenge we all face. How do we find a way to honor that amazing idea that space belongs to all of us, while still unleashing the private innovation and the capital that we need to actually get us out there? The entire future of humanity in space might just depend on how we answer that question.